Okay, let's get started, not to waste any more time. The next session, we're switching the focus back to Europe and looking at what these recent elections, the European Parliament elections, national elections, we've got a lot more actually in the second half of 2024, what that means for Europe over the next 6 months. So we've got a great panel here, and I'd like to welcome all of them and ask them to join me now on stage. Guy Verhofstadt, President of the European Movement International, former member of the European Parliament, and former Prime Minister of Belgium. Welcome, Guy. Please take a seat. Tomi Huhtanen, Executive Director of the Wilfried Martens Centre for European Studies. Welcome, Tomi. Take a seat. And Pavlos Marinakis, Deputy Minister to the Prime Minister of Greece and Government Spokesperson. Welcome. Take a seat. Okay, I'm going to ask Guy to kick us off. What does it all mean, Guy? What's going to happen? What's your assessment of what's going on? Let's get started.
Well, I have to tell you that I was a bit depressed after the previous debate with our American friends. So welcome into the new world order, I would say. A brutal world order, apparently, because if I have it right, we have now Xi in Beijing, we have Putin in Moscow, and then apparently with the new Supreme Court decision, Trump on steroids in Washington is a possibility. So we're going to have a world order dominated by people that, as a Democrat, personally, I don't like. Orban likes them, so that's already a certainty. He is friend of everybody of the three. But it's a world order that is brutal, clearly, in the coming decades. And I think it's a brutal world order not only politically, geopolitically, but also military. See what's happening in Ukraine. Technologically, see what is happening in the rivalry between the US and China and Europe and China. And so I think it will be a world order that is based also on a lot of deglobalization. We are entering in an area already a few years of deglobalizing the world order with COVID, with the war in Ukraine, with the rivalry with China. And maybe we are on the course of a two-tier technological world also, because it's a little bit naive to think that if we stop sending semiconductors to China, that China will not develop its own semiconductors or its own production machines to build them. So I think that is the world order in which nations have only one possibility, that is to enter in a big regional organization like the European Union, like NATO. Looked at what happened to Finland and Sweden. It was unthinkable until recently that both countries would enter NATO. That was unthinkable. That was against their tradition. I'm next to a Finn, so he knows that better than I do. Well, what happened in reality is that they enter because there is no certainty for individual countries outside the umbrella of one of these empires. Because that is the new age in which we have entered, a new age of empires, in fact dominated by China, by India, by America, by possibly Russia. And the question is, and that is my second point, is Europe ready for that new world order? Are we ready today to face that new world order, that brutal world order, also with the trend of deglobalization, militarization that we see every day? And my answer, we are not. It's not impossible to be ready in the coming years, but it will need huge reforms to be ready for that new world order. And that in a few ways. Very short. First of all, on defense. We are spending a lot of money on defense, also in Europe. Maybe in the debate I can show a beautiful slide about that, what we are spending on defense. We are not ready. We have no defense union as a European pillar of NATO, what was the initial idea in the 50s of the founding fathers. We are not ready economically. Our single market needs to be completed and extended not only to traditional products like Greek yogurt or Belgian chocolate, but also to the new goods, the new services of the future. We have no single market in digital, in technological, in telecom, in capital service. And I want to applaud the excellent report of Enrico Letta, present here in the room, for his break-making report on the internal market. And I can only hope, Enrico, that they simply take it, put it in legislative files, and send it to the European Parliament and to the European Council and implement it. That is what needs to be done. So also there. 3, we are not ready institutionally. Why? We are still stuck in the unanimity route. And then 4th, we need to establish the fastest as possible our new relationship with Britain after Brexit. But there, I expect some breakthrough, because with the new government, with Starmer, even when tactically he cannot say anything for the moment during the elections until Thursday, I expect that the first moves in the coming months of this new Labour government will be opening the discussion on rejoining customs union and rejoining the single market.
Okay, we can talk about that. Thanks very much, Guy, and thanks for sticking to time. Tomi, turning to you, I wanted to ask you your response to what Wes Mitchell said in the previous session, which is that Europe shouldn't focus so much on American politics and what might happen with if there is a Donald Trump presidency, but should focus on problems in Europe's backyard and prepare itself, focus on defense and security and taking more responsibility, presumably.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you, Economist, and thank you for having me here. Yes, our American friend was quite optimistic and calming down, indeed. And I think there's a truth in it, in the sense that there's no point for us Europeans to get panicked. That's very clear. That will not help. Secondly, if it's the new administration, Trump administration comes in, I think we have to be open-minded. Yeah, we can make some assumptions, but I think a lot of depends on the attitude which we have with the new team, if there is a new team. And, let's say that Donald Tusk has said, and some European leaders already, that whoever is there, we need to be able to, cooperate them. But let's face the fact. I guess the reality is that Europe needs a little bit more US than US needs Europe, and not least because of war in Ukraine. So the question is then, how shall we play it? So Guy already mentioned defense. I think it's a big challenge. We talk a lot, but it's also a question of money. In order the European defense industry really kick off, there needs to be big financial commitment by the European countries, and we see, great difficulties, And he already painted a picture about the other place, so it's very clear. The war in Ukraine underlined the fact that we need more broader network globally. There's a lot of, we have a lot of business representatives here. Many are looking for India to compensate China, but not only. We need to look at Asia, which is new central point of economic growth, and Africa maybe in 20 years will be new Asia. Who knows? So that's very importantly. But also coming to the issue of Trump, also we need to be more in contact with our Western allies globally, Japan, Australia, and discuss how to handle the possible new situation. That point said, of course, the US election needs to still take place.
Okay, thanks. I was going to ask about China as well, because obviously there's a lot of focus in Europe at the moment on China. And as Guy said, we seem to be moving into this more regionalized world, a world of blocks, and at the same time, a much more protectionist world. And it seems to me that that's the direction in which Europe's going. It's making its own contribution to this.
But if I can comment, but what can we do? If you look, for 10, 50 years, China has broken the WTO rules, is supporting the companies, but also technologically they're very advanced. So they are more or less the same level, and then they use these practices to push us out. Greece, we have a lot of sun here. We know that 50 years ago there was quite strong industry for solar panels here in Europe. Now it's wiped out. So I don't see protectionism, it's, I think maybe rather we are now establishing level playing field with China. That's how I see it.
Okay, thanks. Pavlos Marinakis, what about, how do you see the situation for Greece after the European Parliament election results here and just looking forward for the second term, 1 year in, what's next for the government?
I'm the only one with notes, I think. We're trying to be as accurate as I can. It's a great honor for me to participate in the 28th annual Economist Government Roundtable. It's a privilege to be among individuals with such profound knowledge of public and international politics. Ms. Joan Hoey, Director of the Economist prestigious Annual Democracy Index, thank you very much. Mr. Guy Verhofstadt, who has shown his commitment to the values of the European Union and his dedication to saving Greece during the Greek crisis. We must remember these difficult years for us. And Mr. Tomi Huhtanen, who has contributed to the political dominate of the center-right Europe through his work with the official think tank of the European People's Party, our party. I'm trying to say some thoughts about the future of Europe after the recent popular mandate. I believe we are facing a paradox here, because while the European Union's role is recognized as crucial for the future, citizens approach the European Parliament elections with priorities based on their domestic political scenes. This paradox is evident in different ways. Some countries experienced increased abstention. Others show a rise in votes for extreme parties. We need to decode this paradox. Is it indifference or aversion to the idea and values of the European Union? It is a mandate for less Europe? I believe not. The recent results have certain three dominant causes for me. The first one is that citizens consider the European Parliament elections less important compared to their national or local elections. The second one is that people are dissatisfied with government effectiveness. And the third one is that the prolonged period of normality has led many to forget the dangers that stem from extreme regimes. Putting these points together helps us see things clearly. Citizens consider European elections a safe way to send a message of disapproval to the traditional parties, especially those in power. The issue of abstention will not be resolved simply by reminding people how important is participation. That's not so simple, I think. We need to provide real intensities through our policies to engage young people, especially young people, in shaping their own future. I think that the biggest issues that the younger generations face are housing and financial stability. In Greece, we address the housing shortage through subsidized loan programs with state support and subsidized renovation of vacant houses. Also, we create a more supportive environment for young families by reducing taxes, expanding maternity and paternity leave, and providing more financial support to new mothers from various professional backgrounds. Have these efforts solved the problems? Of course not. Can we be at ease that the recent popular mandate will act as a release valve? Not at all, I think. In the European elections, it is the extreme parties that have benefited. A loose vote for the extremes is the first step, I think, towards a conscious vote for the extremes. We must combat this trend now. Above all, we must stay vigilant, because this vote will impact the European Parliament's decisions. This impact is invisible to many citizens and can distort the real political landscape. Let's take two very simple examples. The first one has to do with the common agricultural policy. How easy it will be for the moderate forces in the new European Parliament to agree on compromises when there are irresponsible voices on both sides accusing them of compromising their principles? The second one is immigration, a huge problem for Europe and a very big problem for our country. How will we achieve consensus on immigration if extreme rhetoric is gaining ground? Our party, New Democracy Party, as government, has often faced this negative logic. We have always chosen hard work and reforms for the benefit of citizens, without considering the political cost. I will briefly mention the new judicial map, tax reforms, legislation for non-state universities after 50 years for our country, and measures to eliminate sport violence. So, how should we interpret the election result? I would say more effective European Union. What does it mean? Firstly, it means a European Union that focuses on and invests in acts that improve daily life, bridge inequalities, and create opportunities. It means acting quickly, without long deliberations. It also means a European Union closer to the citizens, understanding and proactive. What does it mean practically? Policies that combat inflation, tools to promote innovation and support traditional businesses, joint actions for common defense, strategies for energy transition that treat producers as allies, initiatives that will make Europe a leader in the fourth industrial revolution. At the same time, we must make clear to the people that the political agendas of the extremes are impractical and will fail to secure prosperity. Remember Britain. Populist Euroscepticism did not appear overnight. It grew step by step and led to Brexit as the worst possible time. We don't need opinion surveys to realize what went wrong and why. Of course, elections are coming up. We need to wait to the decision of the British people and new government's initiatives. The European Union, as well as Britain, need each other. They need a New York working relationship. Brexit is proof of how things can go wrong quick. Are these suggestions easy? No. It was never easy for Europe to find a common stride. It is no coincidence that Wilfried Martens titled his autobiography, Europe, I Struggle, I Overcome. This is the DNA of Europe, I think, a journey through struggle that leads to overcoming. While the younger generations have not experienced wars and destruction, we have strong memories from the stories of our ancestors. The grandparents of my generation were on the front lines of Second World War. Those who survived found a shattered continent and faced internal divisions. But through poverty and ruins, they laid the foundations for the longest period of peace and progress. The Use Your Vote campaign of the European elections aimed to remind us that the European Union's birth certificate came from the ruins of the Second World War. I could say the same campaign with the same message is now needed more than ever. We must learn from our past and turn this memory into fuel to move forward together. Europe has many things to be proud of. The organization of vaccination, the COVID certificate in which Greece had a leading role. This challenge we describe is the story of Greece over the last 15 years. The economic crisis of 2009, to a prolonged political crisis, the extremes rose and co-governed in 2015. We found ourselves one step before destruction, maybe even one step after. However, our institution endured. We remained in Europe, and the political came to the forefront who brought all this to fruition. Kyriakos Mitsotakis was elected president of New Democracy at 2016 and prime minister in Greece 2019. We and our party officials engage with society, respond to the concerns of the citizens, and offer realistic solutions. We started drawing strength from the belief that this land and all of us deserve better. We are building trust with citizens day by day through each initiative, maintaining clear positions and fostering a spirit of dialogue and cooperation. We were the first to acknowledge that the recent European election results were not what we wanted. However, thanks to this strong trust relationship, New Democracy remains the only stable point of reference of the political map of the country, with almost twice the percentage of the second party. And I'm closing. I assure that you, both within the country and the European Union level, we will prove that we have acknowledged the citizen message. More, faster, and deeper reforms that will add value to the daily lives of every citizen. I believe that, with our example, we will inspire the new European Union leadership and many other member states to follow the same path. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, in fact, Greece is something of an outlier at the moment. Obviously, Greece had its own dalliance with an anti-mainstream party, an insurgent party, Syriza, which came to power in 2015, and it's moved back to the political centre. And so, and actually, the results for New Democracy in the election were not too bad. There was something of a protest vote. The Prime Minister's taken that seriously and said that he will take notice, but it's a kind of different dynamic in Greece than in the rest of Europe. And I think the question that needs to be answered is what is driving this revolt, if we want to call it that, against the centre. And everybody's talking about extremes, the far right, the hard right, the extreme. I don't think that is particularly helpful. There are parties and elements of parties that are of concern in many countries, but it's more that this is an expression of disaffection on the part of, the people have spoken and they don't like what they've been getting for the past few years. So is it not important to acknowledge this if we're going to come up with some solutions? I mean, how do you see, what is the driver of this disenchantment that we're seeing everywhere? And it's going to happen in Austria again and elsewhere.
But not only in Europe.
No, but we're talking about Europe.
But first of all, important to say this is not only a phenomenon in Europe, it's a phenomenon worldwide. So Trump is fishing in the same waters, I would say. But personally, I think it's a combination of three elements. First of all, a poly crisis that we are going through, what is new, what you have never seen in the past. Poly crisis is a combination from migration, first of all, badly managed in Europe, certainly because it has taken 15 years for the European Council to agree on a proposal of the Commission. And it's only when they skipped the condition of unanimity, it was not foreseen in the treaty even, that it was possible to reach an agreement on a package. We will see if this package is sufficient. But if for 15 years the Union, represented by the European Council, is not capable to find an agreement on migration, that's one of the drivers of this discontent. And a second is the problem with inequality. So our market economy or capitalist system has created, if we want it or not, in the US as in Europe, an inequality that is more important than it was in the past. We are returning to inequality levels as we have seen by the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 21st century, and that creates a second element of discontent, including, because of globalization, the loss of middle-class industrial jobs in our industry, and that they are replaced by low-paid, less protected platform jobs in our new economy. That's the second element of the cocktail. And then the third element of the cocktail were the mandatory policies that most governments, for good reasons, did during COVID. We created a sort of a refusal against masks, against mandatory vaccinations, against... So it's a cocktail of these three elements that explain that today yeah, we're going to have a situation where in nearly half of the, mostly 1/3 of the countries in the European Union, we could end with far-right, right-wing parties. And what is clear also is these parties are not using Europe anymore. So if there was one positive thing of Brexit, that it was that since Brexit, even right-wing political parties in Europe don't say anymore, oh, we want the Dexit, Denmark going out, oh, we want the Nexit, the Dutch going out. So most people in Europe, after the Brexit, said, yeah, we are also critical towards the European Union, but we are not so stupid as the Brits to go out. So that's mainly the sentiment in Europe. And that creates now a right-wing movement that is no longer aiming for an exit of the Union, but of the creation of a union of equal member states that have a loose cooperation and that will manage the world. And my point is that will not work, because what is not working today in the European Union is exactly that. It's the European Council that doesn't work. Commission makes proposals, Parliament approves it or amends it, and then they come in the Council and they are stuck there. And that will be worse in the future with the enlargement of the Union. If we go to 34, 35, 36 member states, can you imagine that we have still unanimity, that you have still a veto right, that you have a commission not of 27, but of 36 commissioners? We have already not enough competences for 27, but we will create 37 or 36 commissioners. So that is the question is, if we solve that, we can convince people to be pro-European. If we don't solve it, we continue with too little, too late policies that will strengthen right-wing political parties. That's the point. We are responsible for the success of right-wing political parties because we didn't create a European Union that works fast, effectively, and that creates a European demos, a European interest. Our sovereignty on a national level doesn't mean anything in the world of tomorrow if we don't do it together.
Thanks, Guy. Do you agree with that diagnosis? Also, it's not good policy to call voters stupid. All of us in the UK. I know you didn't mean it.
Yeah, Joan, in the beginning of this discussion, you referred to the result of the European elections. And indeed, in the discussion, there's been a lot of focus on the rise of the far right. It has to do also with the campaigning. But in fact, if you look at the numbers, there's many dynamics there. First of all, it was the increase in the original numbers, the increase of the ECR, so the Conservatives, and ID, the more extreme, was less than the fall of the Greens. So that is the one fact. The second fact is that there was very strong protest vote, which you actually mentioned. Also, you can say that in France, so the votes from government to opposition, and then there is this shift to the right. But there are there's several dynamics there, but of course the discussion, especially because what is happening in France is very much focused on the rise of the right. But there are parallel dynamics happening at the same time.
Yeah, and there's considerable support on the left as a
exactly.
left in France and in other places, actually.
Because we speak about far right, but there's a possibility that in the European Parliament there is also the far left group, and especially look the election result in Germany. That's the fact. Yeah. So it's not only the far right we have challenge of.
To finish up, because we are up against time as usual. We haven't gone over time yet for our half an hour, but let's talk about the future and what comes next. First of all, are we sure that von der Leyen is going to win the vote in the Parliament and be endorsed for a second term? How will this affect the Commission jobs? And policy, what does all this mean for policy? Does it mean that, green and climate policies are going to go on the back burner? What does it mean for enlargement to the Balkans and further east? These are big questions. I just very short want to hear is there going to be gridlock what's going to happen now and what's so, Pavlos?
We are waiting for the vote of the European Parliament. I think we will have a re-election of Ursula von der Leyen. Greece, within its Prime Minister, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, suggested the re-election of Ursula von der Leyen. I think about the future, we have three key words. The first one is respect. Respect to the decisions of citizens of Europe and to listen their messages. The second key word is solutions. Solutions for daily life problems of the people. Faster solutions. And the third one is balance. And a very clear example is the balance between the green climate agenda and common agricultural policy. I remember it was my first briefing to the journalists 1 year ago. I had to answer to a very strict, a very angry, let's say, announcement from the left party of Europe against the European People's Party. And 1 year, 9 months after this announcement and my answer, it was my first answer, we had a very big problem for this issue. I think that we must stay focused on the balance of our policy.
Thank you, Tomi.
Yeah, I take the first question about von der Leyen. I'm optimistic shortly because of three reasons. First of all, in the European Council, I think the discussion was very short. You know, EPP won, the name was there. Secondly, her reputation is strong in Europe, I would claim. But thirdly, and maybe Guy would know more, it's about the dynamics in the European Parliament. Because if you're an MEP or a group who is against von der Leyen, then you have to think, okay, what comes next? If von der Leyen is taken down, which I don't think will happen, the next candidate will be still EPP, if you look at the composition of the council. And then, you know, that means tabula rasa also in negotiation, because then there will be so-called constitutional crisis, and there will be huge pressure for the second candidate to be approved. And that means that tabula rasa on the negotiations. And so everybody needs to then ask what I'm able to leverage on the negotiations in that situation. So I believe that she will be elected, but it will be, you know, it will be maybe quite tight, but she will do it, I think.
But even if she's re-elected, she's still going to face a substantial bloc within the parliament that may be, you know, hostile to some of the policies that.
Well, you know, the stable majority is there. Liberals, Renew, Socialist, EPP, they have the majority. The question is, you know, how disciplined they are. The main interesting question is the Greens, how they will act. They will act. Because in the previous elections, they always negotiated, but in the final moment, as he knows, they didn't vote. And now they want to be in the negotiation, that there's a certain skepticism. So that's very interesting, because indeed, Joan, as you said, you know, it would be better to have also. They need broader support to get through. But I think she will do it.
Okay, thanks. Guy?
Yeah, I think it will be a very tight vote, because it was already tight the last time, with 8 votes. So 8 votes of majority, that means that 4 people are going to the opposite direction, and you don't have anymore a majority. So it will be tight, but finally I think there will be a sort of responsible behavior of at least the 3 groups to say, yeah, otherwise we make the crisis in Europe even bigger than it was now. So to create some minimum stability. But the condition will be for certainly a part of the MEPs of these 3 groups, that von der Leyen is committing better, more concrete on the reform process of the Union. The big disappointment with her last 5 years was on that issue. Now, to say, yeah, we will enlarge the Union, that's obvious. We have no other choice. For the stability of the continent, we need to go to put Western Balkan countries inside the Union, to put Moldavia, Ukraine inside the Union. That is our historical responsibility, I would say. But at the same time, it's also our responsibility to make this union work. It doesn't work with unanimity decision-making. And so a number of these MEPs who are needed to have a majority will ask her to commit very clear points about this reform process. How are you going to deal with the new commission? Will it be one of 37? No is the answer. Will you continue with veto right? No will be the answer. So there will be this commitment needed by her and also process. Parliament, in the previous parliament, I was the rapporteur, did ask for a convention based on Article 48 of the treaties. Council didn't respond, and we got no backing at all from the Commission and from von der Leyen. That needs to be changed in the coming 5 years. Otherwise, she could lose the vote. And that would be a tragedy, because that will put the whole union in a crisis. Despite that, there is a second point. There's defense union. We have to, fastest as possible, to have it in Europe. And a defense union is not against NATO. It's organizing the European pillar of NATO, as was the initial idea in the 40s. And you have to know that the European Defense Union was approved by the American Senate in the 50s to rolled out as the way to organize defense. Because you have to know, everybody is talking about we have to raise the money, military expenditures in Europe to 2% for every country. That's not the issue in Europe. The issue in Europe is that we spend more or less 35% of the Americans on defense. That is a staggering 260 billion. With the UK, it's even more than 300 billion. And that we are not capable to do 10% of the operations of the American army. Why? Because we duplicate everything. The biggest waste of money in Europe is defense. And the fastest we have a defense union, the fastest we will strengthen NATO, we will win the war against Russia, and we will in any way stabilize this continent. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We're 1 minute over, and that is the end of the session.